Hello, I'm retired Battalion Chief Larry Cockman from the Greensboro, North Carolina Fire Department History Book Committee. We're here today at the Greensboro Historical Museum. I'm standing in front of the General Greene, the first steam pumper, or as they called it back then, the steamer. Today, December 9th, 2019, we are starting a new tradition of recording and preserving the heritage and culture of our retirees. Our retirees have contributed so much to the success of our great fire department. Their stories retire with them and are sometimes gone forever when they pass away. They will share their emergency calls that will always be a part of their memories forever. So sit back and listen as they carry us through their journey in the Greensboro Fire Department.
All right, my name is Charles Jones. I've spent 38 and a half years on the fire department. I'm 67 years old, or I will be in April. My rank when I retired was battalion chief. I'm from Brown Summit. I grew up in the red dirt of Brown Summit. All three of my sons decided to come on the fire department. I'm related to Andy Jones, Dan Jones, and Brad Jones. They all went to school and then decided this is what they wanted to do for the rest of their life. Well, most anybody that knows me knows that I spent a lot of time when they were small coaching. And I thought that was the highlight of my life, getting to watch my kids play sports and teaching them how to play sports and teaching them teamwork and sportsmanship. That wasn't a drop in the bucket compared to when my first one said that that's what he wanted to do. And he was kind of riding a bubble, not sure that's what he wanted to do till he went to do his agility test. And when he seen the teamwork, Kenny Robinson and Sean Kennedy were over there. When they were cheering him and pushing him to do his best, when he got done, he said, "This is what I want to do." He said, "That right there is what I want to do." And then the twins followed suit. They went and rode with Andy several times, and then they decided that's what they wanted to do. But seeing them as they went through training, they'd come home. They were all still living at home, but Andy would come home and share what they'd done. That was so much different than coaching them. And I thought that was the epitome of my relationship with my kids. But seeing the spark in their eye, the glitter, and how they really enjoyed this job, that was one of the proudest times I've ever had on fire department. And then the twins the same way. I was enrolled at East Carolina University. I was going there. I come home for summer and I decided I didn't want to go back. And my dad, being the old school person that he was, said, "If you're not going to school, you need to go get a job." Well, this was on the weekend. Well, that Monday, I went and applied with the city. And at that particular time, they just had two openings, police department, fire department. And I feel like that God pushed me toward the fire department because a couple of things why I didn't go to the police department. One, you had to be 21 back then to carry a gun, and I was 19. And another thing, they said you'd have to be a police cadet, and you'd have to wear a little bitty badge. And I did not want to wear a little badge. I wanted the full thing. So I started the process then. I told them I would be interested in the fire department. So I filled out my application. And at that time, I didn't realize it, but it took months, and a lot of guys, it took them years to get hired. Well, another reason I felt like I was called into this profession, they just happened to be getting government money to hire unemployed people. Well, I applied on Monday. I went and done my interview with Chief Osmond at the training center on Tuesday. Wednesday, I went and got a haircut because Chief Osmond told me, he said, "You probably need to get it cut," because it was down to my shoulders. And he told me, he said, "You probably need it cut, not like mine, because his was a buzz cut." He said, "Just get it cut off the ears." So by the time I went and got a haircut and got back home, they'd already been to my neighborhood and done my background check. I come to work on Friday. After applying on Monday, I started working on Friday. And I didn't have a physical or anything. At that time, they sped me through. I got my physical and everything that day. I was never a fire truck chaser because I lived out in the county. And you didn't see that many. It wasn't like living in the city. And I never dreamed that I'd be a firefighter. When I started training, we started January 1st, 1973. I'd come on in June the previous year, and used to, back then, they let you go ride the fire truck before you started training, and that was a good learning experience for you. But I started training January 1st. There were 22 people in our class. Well, you know, I looked at that question, and it said, can you name any of them? I can almost name all 22 of them, just because a lot of people in our class stayed their whole career. We had a few that didn't, but most of them stayed the full 30 years. Well, I seen a thing on Facebook the other day where somebody commented there were 7 chief officers in my training class. And to name them is really easy. You got Danny Shoemate, who retired as deputy chief, Warren Ritter, who retired as assistant chief, Kerry Hensley. You had Larry Coble. You had me. Let's see who else. Carl Eller. And then some other members of that class are Sam Angel, Larry Bailey. In our training class, the first couple of weeks is when we bonded with each other. We'd get together and study. There was a group of us, about 6 of us, that would get together just about every night and study and prepare for our tests. And that made it easier for us. There was never really any struggle. I was 19 years old. I knew absolutely nothing about nothing. And everything that I was exposed to was new to me. And there were 4 people that stood out in my training class. And I want to name them, and it might surprise them if they watch this thing. One of them was Jerry Price. Jerry Price was probably one of the smartest people I've ever met. And I sit beside of him, and he probably didn't even realize how much and high esteem I held him, because I listened to what he said, because Jerry was older than some of the people in our class. And he'd done a lot. And you could tell that he'd done a lot and he'd seen a lot. So I listened to everything he said. I watched the way he performed and all that. And another one was Carl Eller. And a lot of people that don't know Carl very much think Carl's just a nice, easygoing guy. Carl's one of the most competitive people I've ever met in my life. And I've played basketball against him, and he is a competitive person, but above all, he's a good person. And another one was Kerry Hensley, one of the best people you'll ever meet in your life. Good Christian man, and treated everybody with the utmost respect. And the last one was Danny Shoemate. I've never met anybody that loved the Greensboro Fire Department as much as he did from day one. He had a heart for it, and he tried his best to be the best he could possibly be from day one. Probably the toughest thing I done was the first time they put me in the smokehouse with the blackout mask on. For a dumb old country boy from Brown Summit, that's like throwing me into the ocean or something. But they taught you the right way to do it. You go in the door, you find the wall. Well, Chief Kent followed me around for 2 hours. It took me 2 hours to get out. He said I'd get to a point, I'd go back to the middle of the room. He said I'd turn around like one of those toys that hit the wall and turn around and go back. He said that's what I've done. And I struggled with that. And that's the only time I did, because I learned a valuable lesson. It wore my knees out. I had blisters all over my knees. And I learned that once you start, you stay on that wall and you go till you get out. No, and I think the biggest reason is because we were all so serious about it. We all took it very seriously. Now, at lunchtime, we played pickup football and stuff like that to have fun. But when we were actually doing the training class, we didn't play around a whole lot. That was a serious bunch, because they were all serious. Because we had some older guys, had some younger. I think myself and Rick Schuler were the youngest ones at 19. And I think Jerry and Kerry were like 27 or 28. So it was a wide variety, where this was a live or die situation for them. This is a job that they wanted to have, and then those 19-year-olds followed suit. We took it pretty serious because of that. From my first day, June the 6th, 1972, when I went to work out at the training center, and they had us painting and doing all that kind of stuff, I knew I'd done the right thing right then. And then when I got in training with those 21 other guys and seen the way that we looked after each other, turning point to me, though, was when they sent me out to the station before training. I went to Station 4, and I was assigned down there with some of the best people I've ever worked with that looked after me and took me on my days off and taught me how to be a man and taught me how to work. And I went down there at Station 4. I had Captain D.C. Burns as a captain. Harold Smith was my driver. Bobby Taylor rode that truck, and Levi Logan rode that truck. And on the snorkel, it was brand new then. Lloyd Halsey was the driver. Berman Royal was the captain. Howard Snipes was on the truck, and Sarge Alexander. And those guys looked after me and treated me just like I was their son. This was the first assignment when I first went there before we ever started training. After training, I went to Station 3, and I had Ed Lee as a captain. Sleepy Britt was a driver. Had Bob Wooten and Buck Nance was on my company. I didn't. I helped give a few, but I didn't ever have any nicknames stuck to me. The only one that come close to sticking was one that you tried to give me, Bones McJones. And that didn't stay. Mike Garrett, who was down at Station 11, when I worked with him a couple of times, I started calling him Pillsbury because of the little man on TV, and I'd push his stomach and I'd call him Pillsbury because he looked like the Pillsbury Dough Man. And one that he probably doesn't forgive me to this day, Chris Bowman. I was working with him at Station 5. And by the way, one of the best rescue people I ever had the privilege of working with. But we were over at Fairview Pool, and we were going to take swimming tests. Well, he took he come in with his swimsuit on, and I looked down, and his toenails had polish on them. I said, Chris, you a freak. And Freak stuck with him. Everybody at 5 started calling him Freak. Throughout his career, people called him Freak because I give him that name. Chuck Whit was another one. Yeah. I used to make fun of him because his fingers were so short. I said, it looked like Bear Paw. Chuck Whitworth. Okay, yeah. And so we called him Grizz. That Station 11, every one of us called him Grizz. We never called him Chuck, called him Grizz for Grizzly Adams. I saw some good ones done, and I had some good ones done on me, because when I first come on, the Phantom was alive and well. And the Phantom faded out after a few years because it got to the point where people just, and that comes under one of the big changes that we'll talk about later, what changes in the fire department. But I think the Phantom was a good thing to a certain degree. And like when I first come on, I told him, I said, I didn't believe in the Phantom. Well, that was the biggest mistake I ever made, because they took my clothes, they sewed them all up, the legs up, the zipper down, they hid my car, they put tied in my bed, they put all kinds of stuff. And that was part of, once you got through that, you knew you were part of the fire department. It's just like initiation to any club, where they about done away with it now, but in moderation, it helps you become a part. The Phantom was everybody but you. And if you were at one company station, it was 4 other guys. And if you were at 2 company stations, it was 8 other guys. And I even thought I'd outsmarted the Phantom. I took my clothes and hung them in my car and locked the car. Well, Lloyd Halsey picked the lock on my car, put his clothes in there to make me think, because I'd go look and make sure my clothes were in there. And when I went to get them out of the car, they were sewed up wherever I couldn't put them on. The union had started to be active. Fred Lawrence and Frank Jones were head of the union, and I did take part in it. I joined the union, and I went to a lot of meetings. I went to some things. I met with Public Safety Director one time, and I went with Frank and Fred Lawrence to that. So I was involved with it to a certain degree. My crews have always cooked. When I first went out, I couldn't cook anything, and that first crew I worked with after training, Sleepy Britt, was probably one of the best cooks I've ever met in my life, male or female. And that cooking together, cleaning up together, it made you feel like you were part of a team that turned into a family. Chicken was the thing I liked to cook the best, but when I started back when I first come on, I tried chicken livers because I ate chicken liver that somebody cooked. I said, well, that's pretty good. So that's the way I started. I started chicken liver, creamed potatoes, and green beans, and then I eventually went off into other areas. But chicken has always been the thing I like to cook, and I like to eat it. At our house, we probably eat it 4 times a week. Well, that probably in front of cooking, sleeping in a dorm with everybody else, probably created more togetherness than anything else on the fire department. Because you could lay back there in the bed and talk about anything. The guys could talk in their bedroom knowing there was no company officers around or anybody else, and they could discuss problems, discuss issues that they had with each other or with their company officer or whatever. And that developed a cohesive bond between the companies. And I think, which I never slept in a bedroom that was compartmentalized the way they are now. It was always open dorm for us, and then when you got promoted, you got your own room. But when I got promoted, I got sent back over to Station 8 where I got promoted from for a couple of weeks. Well, I slept back in the bedroom with the guys, the same guys I worked with before I got promoted. But I do think that the community bedroom or the dorm type bedroom led to a better team-like atmosphere. Yes, I see it with my 3 boys on there. They don't do it near as much as we used to, where we'd have get-togethers either at the club or at somebody else's house. We always knew what each other was doing. I see now that a lot of the guys, they go in the fire station, they're together then when they leave, they don't see each other for two days. They don't talk to each other for 2 days. And that just wasn't the case back when we first come on. Well, I tell you, I don't go by the fire station much unless one of my kids, and I told my kids, I said, if anybody wants me to come, then they need to ask me. I said, because I realize, I know how busy y'all are. And that's what a lot of the retirees may not realize. Things have changed so much since I was there. And it was busy when I was there. There'd be days that even the station that I was stationed at as battalion chief, I wouldn't see those guys till 5 o'clock. Because of them out in the street testing hydrants, teaching programs, pre-planned stuff. And it's not that they don't want to talk to you sometimes, they just don't have time. And I know my boys will say so-and-so come by and said we had to, we tried not to be rude, but we had appointments that we had to go to. So it's important that they take the time to talk to the guys, but the retirees need to understand it's a different fire department than it was. Like when we first come on, we'd get there, we'd clean the station. Well, we were just waiting on lunch then, but these guys are busy.
Excuse me.
The first fire I ever had, I was riding Engine 4, and it was F.D. Lewis and Sons over there off Banner Avenue. And this was my introduction to then Captain Butch Hager. And anybody that knows Butch knows that when he was on the fire scene, he yelled. He wanted to make sure, and it scared me to death. He started hollering at me to do something, and I didn't know what to do. I thought, if I do this, that might not be exactly what he wants, but it was a working fire, and that was my first fire on the fire department. Some of the major things, and it wasn't necessarily big fires, but it was major to me as a person. The one I remember the most is Davie Street, and I'm sure a lot of guys that come through here talk about Davie Street. And I just got promoted, and I got called in about 11 o'clock that night, and I stayed there till 11 o'clock the next day. And that was the most fire I've ever seen in my life, because I got there right after it jumped Davie Street and got into the apartments that were under construction. And there was enough fire down there for everybody that wanted to fight some fire. A couple of other fires, I was on a call when I was down at Station 11. Emmett Van Ness and I were riding a squad. Jerry Price was driving the ladder truck, and Cliff Oakley was the captain. It was on Hudgens Drive, and as we were en route, it was a report, kids trapped inside. Well, when we got there were neighbors up on the roof taking one little baby out of the upstairs bedroom. Emmett went up the ladder and got that one from them. And Cliff had gone around the back. Danny Waller was the driver on engine 11. He had pulled a line, was knocking the fire down, and it was all in the bottom of the apartment. And this lady done the number one thing that you're told not to do. She took all her kids and went to one location and piled them all in a corner. Well, Cliff was up there, and I went up the back stairway, and Cliff started handing them to me. I took 2 or 3 of them out, handed them to Danny Waller. And we received the first departmental commendation for saving those kids and that lady. And that always stood out to me, that how well, I never heard an order given. I seen Waller pulling the hose, Jerry and them putting up the ladder, Emmett going up the ladder, me going in the back door to where Cliff was. And it was just what you did. I was working for Wayne Weatherman that night. He was at Station 8. And I went to work for him so he could go to school. He was going to get his accounting degree, and he asked me to work for him. So I went in. It was a church fire on Spring Garden Street. It's the last call I ever got to ride with Tommy Morrison before he died. And we were standing at the corner fighting fire, and we heard over the radio that they were getting ready to put the ladder truck up. And so Tommy and I were standing there throwing water on the fire, and we heard a yell and looked up, and it looked like the whole sky was on fire. It looked like electricity was going everywhere. Tommy said, "Charlie, leave me here and you go there and see what you can do." So I went to the truck, and by the time I got around there, Mike was standing there. Mike and I were standing there, Terry Hahn, Danny Shoemate, and I think Harold Robbins. Terry was off duty too. They'd gone up the ladder to get Glenn off the ladder. It had swung into we had been told that the power had been cut, but it hadn't been cut, and when it hit, it electrocuted Glenn. Well, when they passed him down to Mike and I, he was unconscious and not breathing. So Mike and I got him down on the ground and started CPR before EMS got there. And that is something I hope nobody else ever has to deal with. To send one of you guys that you've worked with, you've eaten meals with, and not knowing if you're going to be able to save him or not. Greensboro's been fortunate throughout the years. We haven't had very many people get killed. I think Jesse Gray, and active on the line deal, and then Jackie in the training fire, and then Glenn was as close as anybody I'd ever seen. 9/11, on that particular day, I was on duty. I was sitting in my office, and Jim Robson come in my office. He said, "Did you see that plane just fly into the towers?" So Chief Shoemate had come down to speak to me for a minute, and we walked into my bedroom, cut the TV on, and saw a plane fly into the building. We thought it was a rerun of the first one, and it was the second plane flying into and it makes your heart just hesitate for a minute to know that we were under attack, because you knew then that wasn't an accident, that was intentional for the second one. And we sent out information that day to lock down every fire station. So every fire station went into lockdown, no parking the vehicles outside. And it made me realize right then how serious this job was. Not that I didn't know it before, but it really pounded it home. How quick you can, and then seeing as it played out, to see how quick you can lose a big portion of your fire department. And it lasts for years, because you think about it, you're in the same spot at the battalion chief level as a general over fighting, sending troops in. When you send your friends into a building, you're hoping and praying that nothing goes wrong. And to be in those battalion chiefs' positions up there that made the decision to go in and do what they done and then have that many people killed, I don't see how they ever get over it. I had 3 people that I looked to. And one of them was your brother. When he worked with me and I worked with him and he was my captain, I learned right quick how to build relationships with people. You never seen anybody that had a harsh word to say about Raymond Cockman. And it wasn't because they were afraid. He was just that type person. He made everybody love him. I mean, from strangers, I've seen him. I used to work part-time with him some. And I've seen people just walk up to him and he introduced himself and they just act like they love him to death. That was Raymond. I loved him like he was my brother. I know I didn't feel the loss that you felt, but the day he died just crushed me. I had him that I always felt like if I ever make captain, I want to be like Raymond Cockman. I want to build those kind of relationships with people and have people feel about me the way they felt about him. And another one was Cliff Oakley, best firefighting captain I ever fought fire with. He could lead you into somewhere where you think, I might not get out of here, but you'd go right with him. And the biggest compliment I can give Cliff, my son, was hired back at 5 the day that Eastern Guilford burnt. They sent 5 down there. My wife was having a conniption when she found out that he was at that fire and watching it on TV. She said, you think he's all right? I said, yeah, he's with Cliff Oakley. Can't think of nobody else I'd rather have him with. And I told Cliff that, and I hope he looks at this and realizes what that meant to me and my wife. And the other guy was Danny Shoemate. Danny fought for people from captain all the way to the time he left. He fought for the betterment of the Greensboro Fire Department. And I know some people that come on when he was in operations and when he went to the other deputy chief position that they did not realize what he'd done for this department throughout his career. He's the best operations chief I ever worked for. Johnny decided to change him into the other one and put David Spears, who was also good. But Danny Shoemate fought for this department as hard as anybody I've ever seen in my career. The one that stands out more than anything, and I'll say this because I want to talk about Jackie dying too, but when Chip Seaver died, I went to his funeral. And it was sad enough, because Chip used to work for me, it was sad enough to lose him. But to hear his little boy walking out of that church, all of us were lined up as the family come to, and he was crying, I want my dad. I want my dad. That was the most heartbreaking moment I've ever felt on the fire department. And then when we lost Jackie was another one of those that just drew people to him. You loved him from the time you met him. He was always just full of himself, full of energy. And that was a tough time. And another heartbreaking moment for me come after I retired. And it involves my 3 boys being on the call on South Elm Street that Sterling Southers got hurt. And operations set it up to where my sons they were all spread out throughout the city. One was at Station 8, one was at Station 11, one was at Station 7. They weren't supposed to answer calls together. But on that particular day, other companies were out. So it fell that Engine 7 answered that call first in, and Truck 11. And Engine 8 come on second alarm. So all 3 of my boys were on that fire that day. My wife and I were going to the movies. And we seen the smoke and fire, and I said, I was looking at the fire as we was going to the movie, and I said, they've hit it pretty good, because it's just looks like white smoke coming off of it now. So we went into theater, paid for our ticket, sit down, was watching, where she kept her phone on to watch the little blurs where they said people had gotten hurt. And I thought, well, that's strange, because it looked like it was up, but the news was about 20 minutes behind what was actually happening on the fire scene. So we sit there and she was wearing me out. We need to go check on the boys. I said, Gail, I'm not going down there to the fire scene. She said, then you call somebody. So she said, we need to go. So I thought, I'm fighting a losing battle. So when we got out in the parking lot, I called Bryant Staples' cell phone, because I knew that he'd be down there. And Brent Gerald answered the phone. I said, Brent, I know y'all busy. The only thing I want to ask you, I told him who I was. I said, are my 3 boys okay? He said, they're fine. He said, the worst of it's over now. They're fine. So I got Gail off my back then. And so then we went home. And about supper time, the boys called me. All 3 of them called me. And I thank Eric Johannesson for arranging this, because I know he did. They sent all 3 of those boys home because Andy was on Engine 7. He was on the RIC team that went in to rescue Sterling. Brad was on Ladder 11. He was actually on the roof right before it collapsed. Dan was coming on Engine 8, second alarm, and he thought that was Brad giving the Mayday. And he thought his brother had fallen through and was down there. Andy went in there searching for Sterling, thinking his brother was in there. And that's something nobody should have to deal with. And so when they come home that night, they come in the house. And what broke my heart was the look on their face. They had hurt, they had fear, and they had doubt. And the first thing I done was hug them and then started talking to them. The fear wasn't the firefighting. Their fear was that they hadn't done enough to save Sterling. And the doubt was if they'd done everything within their power to have a good outcome. Because Andy had Shane Boswell and Matt Clapp, who he worked in the station with, get carried out on stretchers. He told me, he said it looked like Sterling was dead. He said it didn't look like there was no hope for him. And the communications of getting back to him while they were on scene wasn't quick enough because they took him to Winston. So they left there not knowing what they'd done for that man. And to be that young in your career and have something like that happen, we all have seen death, but we haven't seen somebody we were right there with not knowing if we had done enough to send those people home. And they seriously doubted if they were in the right profession. They said, this ain't what we signed up for. All 3 of them told me the same thing. This isn't what we didn't sign up to watch our friends die. And it took them a while to get by that. And they went and seen Sterling a lot because that made them feel better to know that Sterling was going to be okay. But those 3 boys learned a lot down there. And I told them, I said, guys, this is called experience. I said, it's tough to get it this soon in your career. I said, but from now on, and everything that happened on fire park, we relate to sports. And I told them, I said, it's like going from JV to varsity. I said, the game speeds up when you go to a higher level. I said, that's what happened then. I said, from now on, every call you go on similar to this will slow down for you, that you'll be able to look and see things that you didn't see that particular day. And so they learned a lot at a high expense because nobody should have to deal with that. Well, the proudest thing in my life concerning the fire department was my 3 boys. I was proud to make captain because a dumb old country boy from Brown Summit to come in here and work hard and try to do a good job and be rewarded by making captain. I was proud of that. And then I had to wait a pretty long time to make battalion chief. I was on 10 battalion chiefs list and I finally made it. And I was very proud of that. But all of that pales in comparison to having my 3 boys decide to do this. And seeing how they've worked hard. They've kept their head down, they've worked hard, they do what they're supposed to do, and all 3 of them have made company officer. And that's probably the proudest thing I can say about my fire department career. In a heartbeat, I'd do it all over again. I would start over if I could get through it now. I'd go back and fight fire now. But I would go on the fire department all over again. Met some of the best people that ever lived while I've been on the fire department. Got relationships that I never would have gained if I hadn't been on the fire department. Got friends that you may not see them for years, but they're always there if you need them. And I don't know very many professions that people hold friendships that dearly. Wouldn't do a whole lot different, like Clarence Hilliard said a while ago. I'd probably get more education, but I made sure that made me determined that my kids would get their education before they come here. And as far as doing anything different, I had fun for 38 and a half years. I tried to make every day that I supervised somebody fun. And I used to always pray before I'd go to the fire station, God, please let me send everybody home. And for 38 and a half years, whether I was riding the back of the truck, I feel like I contributed to sending people home. When I made captain, I never had to call anybody and say, so-and-so got hurt. God protected them, and he gave me the common sense to depend on them. I always wanted to be the dumbest one on the truck. And I managed that because I had smart people work for me. I had, if you could name a who's who in the fire department, most of those guys worked for me and with me. I enjoyed it. They helped me make good decisions. I always took their input. And I just had a fantastic career. I wouldn't change anything. The role as a firefighter, it's changed a lot, because when I first come on, you answer fire calls. You go put fires out. You go help somebody if they fell down maybe, but we didn't ride med calls. Riding med calls changed the whole dynamics of the Greensboro Fire Department. Now, firemen are called to do everything. That's what people will tell you that a retired fireman said, we've been called on everything you can think of, from clogged toilets, to leaking pipes, to heart attacks, to suicides. Yes, the role of firefighter has changed. I think they face more pressure today than they've ever faced in their life. I think that there's more programs out there to help them deal with this type stuff, where we'd have to go back to the fire station and just talk to each other. There's programs and people out there that can help these guys deal with the high pressure that goes with being a firefighter today. In my eyes, to be a successful firefighter, it don't take a whole lot. It takes a lot of common sense, a lot of compassion, and a love for other people. The people that you work with and the people you serve. You've got to love doing this job to be good at it. And I think that it takes being willing to open up and build relationships with people. And that's what I've tried to teach my kids as they come on the fire department. I said, as you go up, always look after your people. Because the people are a fire truck you can replace tomorrow. A piece of equipment you can replace tomorrow. But you can't replace people. You need to look after the people that work with you, whether you're in charge or not. You keep each other in your sight. When you ride in the back, you got everybody else's back. You look after them. You do not let them get in situations that's going to get them hurt or killed. That's an easy question. The person that made the biggest difference in my life is my wife. We celebrated 40 years together, February the 9th of this year. 42 years ago, she come into my life, and it's never been the same. We were partners. We were teammates. And she was a single mother for every third day. And we raised our kids. I think we done okay. She's a big part of that. She had the discipline. She called me one night at the fire station. She said, Charlie, she said, these boys are driving me crazy. I don't know what I'm going to do. I said, Gail, I'm 13 miles away from our house. I said, there's nothing I can do. Next thing I heard was a dial tone. And she never called me back to ask me to handle anything again. She toughened up right then, and we raised our kids in church. We didn't send them to church or take them and drop them off. And they didn't get a bye when I was at the fire station. She took them by herself, 3 little boys, and would sit on the pew in church. And I had several people tell me, I don't know how she does it. She always told them they fear for their life. They know if I tell their daddy they misbehaved in church, that he'd beat them to death. But that woman has stood by me and put up with the sad times on the fire department. She helped me through deaths of my parents. She's been there with me every step of the way. And I couldn't have done it without her. And I told somebody the other day, I said, you know, firemen get told, thank you for your service. Thank you for what you do. I told them, I said, you need to be thanking their wives too. I said, because if it wasn't for a good wife, a fireman couldn't do his job. I said, and I always thank my wife for being there with me. Through studying for the captain's exam, studying to make chief, she was always there with me. When I didn't get it, she knew, oh, this is going to be terrible. And she gave me a few days to come out of the funk I was in. She just knew what to do. Well, I'm afraid sometimes people take this as a job with benefits. And I think right now, I talked to Brent Gerald the other day. He said, yeah, when we finally got rid of the ones that didn't need to be here, we got a pretty good training class. I think too many people take this job as a job instead of a calling or something that's a career. And this isn't a job. This is something that you got to come into. Like I said earlier, you got to love who you're working with and love the people you serve. You got to be a servant at heart, because you're not going to get rich working for the Greensboro Fire Department. But you can have a rewarding life, and rich in every other sense of the word. Because I think the guys coming on now need to know that it is a serious job. You could get killed in an instant. And I think they need to know that coming on, and that to just always look after each other and to be to each other what you want them to be to you. And I think you've got to be an unselfish person to be a good firefighter. What I want the fire department, what I hope they remember about me, is that I didn't preach to them, but I hope they seen I was a little bit different than some people, that I was a Christian, and that I treated people like they needed to be treated. And I learned raising identical twins that you don't treat people the same to be fair to them. Because my twins have different personalities, and I had to treat them different than I treated Andy to be fair to them. And that's the thing about being a manager or supervisor. Everybody says, treat everybody the same. Well, then you're not being fair if you treat everybody the same. Everybody's different. You be fair to everybody. You be honest with everybody and stand behind your word. I told my boys, they come home, they say, so-and-so said, hey, and all this. I said, they don't ever talk about what kind of fireground person I was, do they? They said, no, they talk about how good you were to them and how you looked after them. That's what I wanted. I wanted to send everybody home and to leave with people knowing that man cared about me. You know, it's a lot of the same thing. Because I tried to treat my fire department people like my family. I want my boys to remember that I feared God and I lived for Him, and that I treated them fairly. Because when you're raising 3 boys that compete for air in the same house, you really got to be fair. And to know that I loved them with all my heart. And that I am proud to be their dad. And that's about all I can say about that. Well, there's a reason that I don't go to the fire stations very much, because I know that in the past that they don't have time for the retirees. And that's the biggest reason I don't go, because I don't want to intrude on their time. But this thing that you're doing has rejuvenated the retirees themselves. And a lot of them feel like I do, that they don't want to go to the fire stations because they don't want to bother anybody. But seeing this and seeing the increase in attendance at retirees the club, I see the stuff that you post on Facebook, and I say, you know, that's neat to see that many of them there, that they can all still hang out with each other. Used to, I know for a fact there wasn't but probably 15, sometimes 10 come to the Firemen's Club. Now, I think Gary Evans told me the other night you had over 50 here. And I think it's important for them to feel like they're not forgotten, because that's the worst thing in the world, to feel like you give your life to something and they just forgot you. And I think that's the way a lot of the retirees feel. I haven't been retired as long as some of them. I haven't been retired as long as you have. And so I know that the longer you wait, the less of a part you feel. This has changed that. I think the notoriety of knowing that I had a battalion chief tell me the other day, he said, you know those little clips that were shown, said, there were people in my station didn't know any of those guys. I said, that's a shame, because those were some of the best guys I ever met in my life. And just the way they would teach you. And I don't know that that goes on as much, because they are so, Lloyd Halsey took me and helped me, taught me how to do landscaping work. Bobby Taylor and Harold Smith did. You and Carl let me work with you mowing, doing stuff like that. I don't know that there's a whole lot of that type teaching lifestyle to the fire department anymore. Those guys were good at it. They treated you like their sons. And that's making them feel more important now.
We hope you enjoyed watching these documentaries. It was our goal to share and preserve the memories of our retired Greensboro firefighters. It is our desire that these documentaries will inspire future generations to continue the brotherhood, sisterhood, and camaraderie while always striving for excellence in their careers. While fire apparatus, equipment, and technology have improved, several things will always remain the same. The courage and bravery it takes to mitigate natural and man-made disasters will always be a part of the job. Although our retirees are no longer a physical part of the GFD world, a giant piece of each retiree's memories have been shared with you today. These memories will be in their hearts and minds forever. A special thank you goes out to Captain Harold Haney for his many long hours of recording and editing. Thank you, Harold. A job well done.